Hello, adventurer. It's good to see you. You have made it to the morning grind.
Welcome, welcome.
It's the live stream at the beginning of the Geekverse, where we talk about all types of topics in geekdom, gaming, and fantasy, with an emphasis on being constructive and creating the things that we want to exist in the world.
It's all on the grind, Sizemore. Can't be too fine, can't be too coarse.
That's exactly right. There are a lot of adventures to be had today. Dungeons to explore and monsters to slay, and who knows what a random encounter might send our way. That's why we have to prepare, so settle in now for the morning grind with your favorite beverage in hand.
Tea? Or maybe something a little stronger. I've got a few bottles of the old Wynyard left.
Whatever you want. Pull up a chair.
Dude.
If you're feeling fancy, how about a cappuccino? Or a frappuccino? Or how about an espresso?
Just tea, thank you.
Sounds good to me, Gandalf. Whatever you want. I'm just glad you're here.
Everyone is welcome. You can just watch if you want. You don't have to worship anything you don't want to worship.
Thank you, Mike. But be forewarned.
Sometimes we get really strange characters around here.
Wait, what's that you say? Why can't you come and be a part of the stream?
My wife would disown me.
Oh no, I bet she'll be fine with it. Come on in.
Am I scared for my safety? No.
What are we supposed to do?
Everybody do the secret handshake.
Secret cultist handshake.
Oh, now do wizards who love each other.
This, my friend, is a science.
I still don't have gifts, but it's fine.
It's all on the grind, son. Can't be too fine, can't be too coarse.
Dude, this would be a sick place to bring the band.
Indeed it would be, Dave. It really would. I'm seeing more people coming in. Welcome. Glad to have you here. Oh, look, here's someone new.
Is this the cultist meetup?
Yes it is.
Come to hang out? Please accept me. I have nothing else.
Okay, we accept you. Everyone's welcome here.
Brought some snacks.
Well, that makes things even better.
You want some coffee? I don't drink coffee. You sure?
It's cultist coffee.
What makes it cultist coffee? I'm a cultist and I'm drinking it. Oh. Then I'll have some.
What exactly is going on here?
I'm seeing more people coming in. Welcome. It's so great to have you. Oh, and look, here comes another stranger.
Can we help you?
Yes, fellow cultists. I could really use some food.
Oh yeah? Welcome. We have donuts.
Oh, it's me. I'm glad I'm here. I'm sure you have a few questions for me, though.
What's your name? Who do you work for? What god do you worship?
Great questions, Rob.
I'm Steve King, and I worship Nyarlathotep.
No, not really. I'm just Heath, and I won't be worshiping anything this morning. But I will be your host. Welcome to the office. We're going to have a great time. I've got my coffee ready, because now it's time for the morning grind.
If you could become a fish, that would be amazing. Then I could command you with my mental fish powers.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Realized the microphone was in the wrong place from last night. Here we go. Welcome to the office, everybody. Welcome to the morning grind. We're going to be continuing our discussion on RPG design, and talking about basically the character stats and the character sheet, which is what we started talking about yesterday. And yesterday was Hero Quest night, so there was the morning grind. Then there was actually about an hour and a half of yard work yesterday. Then I had to get ready for Hero Quest last night, and then we played Hero Quest, and we had a fantastic time. So last night, so there wasn't a whole lot of other creative work done yesterday afternoon, but that's all right. There's still plenty to discuss, and I'm hoping to be able to do that this afternoon. Last night was fantastic. If you are into Hero Quest, I highly recommend wearing this name. I'm wondering if I can clip. I've been clipping and I've been having some success, which does take time. But I've had some success clipping some of the morning grinds. I wonder if there's some way to edit those. Now, here I'm back to editing Dinner and a Board Game, but some way to edit it down and release some of them in chunks. Because there may be people who are interested in watching, even though because they're long games. Of course, they're very fun to go through with everybody live. That's why I love the live, because of the live interaction. We played Hero Quest. I've got some thoughts on that. But let's see who we got. Micah, good morning. Good morning. James is here. And Robert, good morning. As well as Mike, good morning. And Stray, good morning, Stray. Good to see you. James is also here. That secret cultist head slap slays me every time. That was something they thought of themselves on set. They were, I forget exactly how it was written into the script, but some kind of ridiculous looking handshake or something like that. And they came up with the idea that he misses and hits him in the head on their own. So good morning. So great addition from the actors. Good morning, Micah. Yes, please do. Also, please do like, subscribe. Let's do that. And Discord. I was about to say Discord server. Oh, hello. DJ Advin. Good morning. Good morning. And W3 Techie as well. Do check out the Discord server. Please do come into the Discord server. There's some stuff I've got to respond to in the Discord server. There's a lot I've got to respond to. And emails and things like that as well. Please do come by the Discord server. And also, please come by the Goodnight Sword Kickstarter. I've got to get some other stuff out. We are closing down or barreling down to the end. So Thursday will be the end of the Goodnight Sword Kickstarter. And we will close this out with a Thursday night live stream of some kind for Goodnight Sword. 43 backers now. 43 people have come in. This is quick. This is easy. This is low drama Kickstarter. Goodnight Sword, getting the books to the people who want them. A world of gallantry, chivalry, and rabbits based on the classic story Goodnight Moon. This is the first book out in the Tales of Rabavania. And then we're going to move on and start doing other stories, but then also RPGs and other tabletop games in these worlds. But I want there to be stories as well as games. So this is for the youngest audience. This book is for the youngest audience, obviously. And also, if you want to check it out, there is an animated audiobook embedded in the page. So if you want to listen to it, which means that if you have somebody who you think would be enjoying Goodnight Sword, and what geek wouldn't want to read to a young child who you want to be interested in fantasy, a book called Goodnight Sword. But there's an animated audiobook as well. So you could be listening to it tonight. you could have it on the iPad tonight. But then on the Kickstarter, there the digital edition, and then also, if you prefer a hardback for story time, and bedtime stories, which I would, there's the hardback option, and the hardback option is the Kickstarter. What's happening here on this Kickstarter to make that happen. All right, let's see what else. Good morning, Zero the Blade. Discord, Goodnight server, Hero Quest. All right, if you don't, I had a thought on Hero Quest based on what happened last night. Oh, before I do that, I will say I also got this. This showed up yesterday. I did get the actual Kings of War. I believe this is the 3rd edition book. So I was waiting for this to come in because we did take a look at Kings of War on the morning grind a few days ago or whatever, and just took a look at how to play. This is by Mantic, and this is the kind of equivalent of Warhammer Fantasy Battles ever since Warhammer Fantasy Battles went away. And so, but we looked at how to play, but we didn't have army lists and things like that. So this book right here has tons of army lists in it. And so I got this. I got all of my miniatures over there still in the kitchen laid out because my brother wants to play, and he was still trying to get his children involved. So our plan is we want to play anyway. So we're thinking about playing this. And so our plan is to put together a small army and then go over to his house and have Dad and Uncle Heath playing. And then maybe they'll see us playing and be like, okay, so what's going on over here on this table? So I'll let you know. We're still going to stay RPG focused because that's what I'm trying to get out here. But eventually I'd like to do a war game too. So I'm going to keep notes. Later we'll talk about this after we talk about RPGs and the RPG development. But I'm going to take notes about what I like about this game and what I don't like about this game as I play. Because my brother and I, we did War of Kings together. We did Enchantress together. We shouldn't be afraid to alter a war game, war games rules, and try to come up with a set that we want. So that's going to be going on in the background, but focused over here on RPGs for the moment. Good morning. Good morning. No, it was not. Oh, that sounds, they dropped them. Nice. Dropped is in released, not dropped is in decided to stop doing the project, right? I did not know that. That I did not see that. That there is a section if something like that comes up on the Discord server called News for the Grind. So we should definitely, let me go over here and Google this, because that does sound like something we should go over. Is it called Daggerheart? Daggerheart released? It says coming soon. I need a link. If you have a link, if somebody has a link on that, put it in the Discord service. They released a small PDF and a video how to. Okay. We should look at that. Maybe that would be tomorrow's subject. So, but if somebody has a link, please do put it in the Discord server. That would be great. Let me make a note someplace. Oh, all of my notes are someplace else because I've moved everything because of last night. So, but I can go over here. Daggerheart. Interesting to see what they are doing. Okay, thank you for letting me know. So I have very different feelings about Hero Quest, or I have new feelings. I have new feelings about Hero Quest after last night and some of the experiences with the Barbarian Quest pack. I thought it was interesting that people had said, "Hey, this sounds like, or this felt like very first edition," and I had never thought of that. First edition D&D, and I had never thought of that. Of course, I kind of think of it as a lightweight game, and I think that some of the quests early on are pretty easy, especially if you are playing optimally. And I've been going through the original quest pack. It's been a while since we've been able to play, but of course, I played through the original quest pack probably a couple of times. We played a lot of Hero Quest or more over the decades, but I've been going through it with my nephews again, Zargoning them through that, and now they released that they played far from optimally. They were far from optimal Hero Quest players, which does make the game much more difficult. But if you're playing optimally, then I think you can get through those quests, as I remember, pretty easily. But with these new releases, I had always heard that the Frozen Horror was extremely tough to the point that, oh my God, did they even play test this? And I was on the edge, like with every quest in the Frozen Horror one that we had done. And it took me out last night. It took me out. And it seems like it was definitely geared to making sure that you have a lot of gear. That if you are brand new heroes, and that's why I think, oh, we died. I don't know if you can even reset brand new heroes, because I think they would just get slaughtered moving into another quest. So those quests are set up that, oh, you're supposed to have treasure from all of those easier quests and really have your characters outfitted. But also, it does seem to play that if you go in the wrong direction, it's not going to be easy for you. If you go in the wrong direction, and it's not easy to know what the right direction is. If you move in the wrong direction, you're going to face a lot of opposition. And if you go in certain directions, it may just close you off. Like the way that I was going last night, I started running from a whole swarm of monsters, and I just ran in the wrong direction. So I actually was running into a dead end. Like that was not going to be easy. So there was definitely, that's a new kind of thought and experience with Hero Quest, because I think of Hero Quest as lightweight, because I think of it as an ideal kind of family fantasy game because the rules aren't that difficult. That means that there are a lot more players for it, in my experience, because there are people who will play Hero Quest who will not play Gloomhaven, for instance. So that's nice. That always gets you lots of players, but yet there's enough to the game that it generally satisfies harder core gamers and the ones who do want to play something like, well, Gloomhaven. But if you've got a bunch of people sitting around and playing Hero Quest, that's fun. But then again, turns out there is a hardcore element to Hero Quest as well, with something like the Frozen Horror. I'm interested to know how like the Dread Moon release is going to go, because the Mage of the Mirror, which is the Elf Quest pack, and the Frozen Horror, which is the Barbarian Quest pack, those are definitely those were released decades ago, and these are re-releases of what they were then. I was hoping, as with most of the things in Hero Quest, that they would go by and clean up things from both of those, from all the original releases, and the difficulty and perhaps insanity of those two quest packs might have been something to change. But I was wondering, can I get through it? And I just don't know. But so it was a different kind of Hero Quest when you were actually playing something that is very brutal, and punishes you if you make wrong decisions. So If you're looking for that kind of gameplay experience, HeroQuest is providing it. Tomocrat says, so I want HeroQuest now with that Zargon app. It is nice having the Zargon app. Good morning, Sable Phoenix. How many expansions for HeroQuest are there? Right now, there are 4. There are the Frozen Horror, the Mage of the Mirror, Kalar's Keep, and Return of the Witch Lord. And now the reason I didn't start with Kalar's Keep and Return of the Witch Lord is because I had them from back in their original release, and I played them a lot. I don't remember them. I could go back and play them, but I did play them a lot. I never played the Frozen Horror. So I wanted to start with something I'd never done. I remember Kalar's. I mean, we played through Kalar's Keep and Return of the Witch Lord years and years and years ago. I don't remember it being anywhere near something like what went through with the Frozen Horror. So that one was those are much more gameable and playable. I bet I could defeat those. Micah says, I'm interested in both, but had not had time to look at the quick play guide and was working during the live stream. Got to wait until Tuesday shift to listen in. Okay, well, let's talk about, so those are my thoughts. So that was a side of HeroQuest that I wasn't really, I hadn't really experienced last night. So it's tough. It's tough. It was brutal. Okay, let me bring up where we were with our rules discussion. Where is my primer? Here it is. All right. Where were we? We had just been talking about, I think the thing that we had just finished was talking about this idea of having a high concept. And maybe it needs to change its name. That's fine. But we had just been talking about the high concept, which is adjective, species, profession, from place. And I do mean for these things to have mechanical impacts. So bold half-elven ranger from the deep wood of Algathir. That's why you construct it in that way. So bold, and right now I use the word invocable. That's supposed to be something that could give you an advantage in certain circumstances, but it's also something that could give you a disadvantage. And I also talked about how I thought it was important that all of these be something that gives your player an advantage or something to do, but then also could potentially make the player's life or the character's life more complicated. Democrat says, sounds like the expansions for HeroQuest needed difficulty notes. Yeah, that would actually be a great thing. Difficulty notes, 1 skull, easy, 5 skulls, Yeti time. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's actually what it should have. And that the skulls make a perfect rating system for that. Like difficulty rating and then by skulls. Absolutely. Yeah, I said there, you said how many expansions are there? There are 4 right now, but the 5th one, I think it's Rise of the Dread Moon, is coming this summer. So the 5th one is coming this summer. And I'm interested in that one because that was not one, that one's a brand new one. It was not one that existed during the original release. So Rise of the Dread Moon, I'm curious to see what it's like, because it was never released before. It was completely created new for this one, for this new release. So there will be 5 this summer. Okay, so what next? So I was trying to say that the characters in a Fated Edge game would be based around a high concept, a background, core abilities, resistances, traits, skills, special features, and perhaps a trouble. And I was wondering whether or not the trouble would be integrated into these other things, or if the trouble should stand alone. That's kind of a Fate thing, and I do like the trouble mechanic we talked about. So that's what we're trying to build out here. A high concept, a background, core abilities, resistances, traits, skills, and special features. And the idea here is that I was also, now I may be too verbose right here. This is the idea, but this is the general idea. I'm not talking about how to generate all of this right now, but I'm trying to say that if there was a 6x9 character sheet that had numbers on the different areas, and then you were referencing here, the second thing you should do is look at a character sheet and see what all of the different parts of the character sheet are, so that you would know a lot about how exactly this is going to play. And also, if you had a pre-generated character, then it was sitting in front of you from a box set or something the game master did, and you're like, okay, well, now how do I read this? What exactly is on this? You've got a reference for exactly what your character sheet looks like. Yes, the trouble is like a flaw. Moon Swan says, good morning, Keith. Yeah, 5th expansion coming out. Yep. And new hero. Yes, good point, Moon Swan. Good morning, Moon Swan. Oh, we should breathe and sip. So let's do that. 2 deep breaths. Everybody got your drink here? I've got Mountain Dew Zero again. Here we go. If you're not breathing and sipping with us, you totally should. And make your life better. So next, okay, the background. The character's background augments his or her profession with additional skills of lower levels. Skills at, let's say, at lower levels than given by the profession. I don't know if this is the right place to bring it up, but this could also represent a hobby or secondary interest the character has. So we're going to have a skill list. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But I like the idea of combining so we're combining species, profession from a location, and then you also get a background draw. So this could be background, or I think it could be if you are trying to do something like multi-class, perhaps then what would the equivalent of multi-classes would be, because there aren't classes here. But if you were talking about something of the equivalent, you could say, well, I like being I'm a barbarian, but I also want to bring in some like ranger attributes. So maybe there's some kind of secondary ranger interest or something like that you could bring in, and then give that character some of the skills from that other profession. I think it's important when you're building out backgrounds. And remember, this is also supposed to be a toolkit to go on and build out more world-specific RPGs. I think it's important with the background, and this is one of my problems with the 5th edition backgrounds, is that it shouldn't necessarily be obvious, or it shouldn't be obvious that a character of a certain profession should have a certain background. Because if you should have it, or if it's required, then that background needs to be implied in the profession. And likewise, there shouldn't be something that you have to take. If you're this profession, you shouldn't have to take this certain other background. Some of the 5th edition backgrounds feel like they fit together too neatly. Like, or, if you're a fighter, take soldier. If you're a fighter, take soldier. Or if you're a cleric, take acolyte. But to me, it seems like it'd be more fun if you're mixing up the professions and the backgrounds. But I found out that if you don't take certain things with the backgrounds, since in 5th edition, the backgrounds are giving you certain skills, and it's just proficiency, that you can end up with a character that, I don't have certain skills that really seems like I should have, because I took this background because I was trying to make a more interesting character type, but now I actually don't have this skill that's important for the actual main character class. That happened to me when I was playing a wizard in 5th edition. I was trying to do an interesting wizard concept, but it actually kind of hurt not taking like the scholar or something like that, the more standard wizard background. So the mixing and matching here, I think, is an important one for character customization. That's why I say it also could represent like a hobby or a secondary interest or secondary specialization or something like that here. Oh, okay. Thank you. I'm going to try to remember this. Thank you. So sometimes it's difficult to know everybody's usernames. So it's D Jadavin. D Jadavin. Okay. I'll try to keep that in mind. Thank you. Mike says, yeah, they've also hinted about re-releasing the European expansions against the Ogre Horde and Wizards of Morcar. Plus, they never released Dwarf or Wizard expansions. Yeah, I'm hoping they put out Dwarf and Wizard expansions because those were never released during the original release. We never got around to Dwarf and Wizard expansions. So I would be nice if they had those. And I never had Ogre Horde or Wizards of Morcar. They were European only releases. So they never got brought over here. I'm over here in North America. So if they release those, I would definitely get them. Tomocrat says, you definitely need to think background and classes, especially how limited skills are in 5th edition. Right. So I think having a background, is going to be good. So then have these at a lower level, because we're going to have like 5 different skill levels. 5 different levels of proficiency. It seems like a lot of people are thinking about that. So there isn't an infinite number of different levels of proficiency, but like something like 5 is probably good. So you've got levels, professional levels. So the profession, that's a core component of what the profession actually does. Once you get your profession, the professions identify the primary skills the character is proficient in and at what level. Level I'm just using here. The phraseology may change, but level, what degree of proficiency is proficient at and at what degree of proficiency. So then you have some other non-professional levels of skills which can come from this background. So core attributes. The character's core attributes are made up of 2 different sets of statistics. Abilities, and I've thought more about abilities than I have the resistances we're about to see here, because I don't want to go. One of my problems with something like the 5th edition or just the Dungeons and Dragons traditional attributes in general is that some of them don't get used very often at all. Some of them are more powerful than others. That's not bad if you're operating in a point-based kind of environment, while you're doing a point-based build. But I want all of the core abilities to be used. And some people in OSR or revisions and game revisions have been trying to change that. Trying to shake up. Knave was shaking up exactly like moving ranged attacks over to wisdom and so forth. So I want these to be reused. So these are our core attributes. Characters really are, the core attributes is an important part of the characters. A character's core attributes are made up of 2 different sets of statistics. Abilities are used anytime a character attempts an action and reflects how good a character is at impacting the world using different methods. Changing something about the world. So abilities help you change the world. I want something to change. I'm about to take an action, so I need to use my abilities. Whereas the reverse is a resistance. Resistances are used to keep elements of the external world, or just to keep the external world. This is not final phraseology by any way. Resistances are used to keep the external world from impacting the character. They are most often used when someone or something is trying to harm the character in some way. So if you want to change something about the world, or if you want to harm something else, that's going to be based on some ability you have. If something else is trying to harm you, then that needs to be based on one of your resistances. So abilities. So I want a small number of abilities. Okay, so the abilities then, a character's ability scores will be the most used characteristics, will be the characters, the ability scores or ability scores will be the characters' most used characteristics. They determine how easy it is for the character to impact and or change the world. There are 4 ability scores representing 4 different ways the character can interact with and try to influence the world around them. So I was trying to think of what different ways do we have of interacting with and trying to influence the world just in our everyday life. If you were trying to categorize these for a game, and these are broad categories. I mean, these are broad categories. It's also important to me that every action you can take needs to be run through these ability scores. So it needs to be able to come through this ability score. So in this sense, it's not a skill-based game. In GURPS, you've got both abilities and skills. In some games, you just have skills. So you've got to run everything through a skill. And if the skill doesn't fit, then there's a problem. There's a problem of adjudication at the table. Instead, every action that you take needs to go through one of these ability scores. So I said, let's use strength, intelligence, dexterity, and presence. What do you think about that? These are, I think, the main 4 categories about if you are trying to change the world. How do you do that? So strength measures a character's brawn and muscle mass. Strength is used when with such actions as lifting large rocks, lifting portcullises, or bashing in a door. So that's strength. There's something about the world I don't like. How am I going to change that? I'm going to just use raw physical power to go and change something physically about the world. Intelligence measures the character's intellectual or analytical capability. It is used, well, need examples there. But intelligence, I need something about to change the world. So primarily what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my intelligence to change something about the world. Raw physicality or intelligence. We can think of examples about using intelligence to change something about the world. I mean, development of technology or something like that would be using intelligence to change the world. Whereas dexterity measures a character's ability to control and move their body. It's used when attempting such actions that have moving and maneuvering their bodies, such as leaping pits, etc., etc. Strength, intelligence, dexterity, and then the 4th one is presence, and I could use bearing for that. I mean, you could use charisma too. I was using presence right now. Measures a character's personal magnetism, charisma, and charm. This is used when undertaking actions that have to do with influencing people, such as in social situations, as well as calming or otherwise dealing with animals. So this one right here is your social skill. Those seem to be my big categories. How to change the world. Change the world with strength, change the world with intelligence, change the world by moving your body or changing, with dexterity in some way. Or, and by the way, changing the world could be, like moving over a pit or something. I'm over here on this side of the pit. I need to change the world. I want to move my character over to the other side of the pit. My character's got to get to the other side of the pit. That's changing the world. So there's some kind of, I'm using the word change the world in kind of like a game state kind of terminology. All right. So sometimes you don't have to roll in order to change the world. My character's on one side of the room. I want to walk over to the other side of the room. Okay. No roll necessary. World change. World changed. Character's position updated. But in some cases, I got to jump across the pit. Well, what's going to govern that? Dexterity. Acting, yes. Acting versus being acted upon. Persuading a monarch to not go to war would be an example of the intellect in influencing the world. Or that could be the presence. Or getting the monarch to go to war. Do you need int? Can it be rolled into presence? I think that my inclination is that we do at the moment. I mean, it's a valid question. At the moment, I think that you do, because what if you had a very, like up here, this would say if you had a high intelligence, you're very intellectual, you're very analytical, but you're very socially awkward. Now, this doesn't necessarily have to be socially awkward, but it could be. You could interpret it. You can interpret a character that way, that the character is very intelligent, very good at all, analytical kinds of skills. But if that's the person who you need to persuade the king not to go to war or to get the king to go to war, man, that is just not the person that you send in. So that would be the distinction that I would be thinking about right there. Those are my categories. Now, that does mean that I think some of these are more useful than others. I mean, dexterity, again, at the moment, I haven't figured out how everything goes from here, but dexterity is pretty useful. Buck Tacky says, brewing a potion to complete a task. Like potion brewing, alchemy and stuff like that. I can see that being, to me, that seems more intelligence than presence. Sable Phoenix says, I'm a fan of cutting down the core abilities as low as possible. You think 3 isn't? I don't think that 3 is not workable. Like just in general, like if you're talking about games, we've seen examples of games that use 3 different core attributes. At the moment, I'm liking 4, but to me, 4 is pretty good. 5, you could go. So to me, it's like 3, 4, or 5. 5 at the high end, 3 at the low end, 4 hits pretty good. Okay, yes, Tomocrat, this is a great point. This is so what I'm going for here is actually more of how 5th edition is supposed to be played, but it's often not, like very often not, because there is this should, what you're talking about right here, Tomocrat, should have been emphasized in 5th edition much more. Tomocrat says 5e does have their skills being an attribute shifting setup, using int for persuasion, for example. It's just sadly most players and DMs either don't know or don't care that they can do that, because it's not well, I lost my train of thought. It's not extremely well defined in the game. It's only like in a sidebar, right? There's just a sidebar or something that talks about using skills or using attributes with different kinds of skills. And it's a lot of people. I think this is also a flaw in the 5th edition character sheet, because the character sheet lists all the skills. There's a skill list in 5th edition that's right there. And you've got all of the skills there, and only some of them are bubbled, right? Only some of them are bubbled in to tell you that you have proficiency in them. A much better way, I think, because what that causes, I think, is hey, I want to do something. So if a player wants to do something, what do? Often they look at that list of skills and try to come up with, what kind of skill can I use? And then, I don't even have this. They think they don't have it, which means they're not proficient in it. Oh, I don't have X. You're supposed to be rolling, actually in 5th edition, which is actually kind of the way this is going. There are no skill checks in 5th edition, right? There are only attribute checks or ability score checks that are modified by proficiency in a skill if the skill is relevant and you have it, right? So that's the way you're supposed to be playing. You're not actually supposed to be looking down for skills. You're supposed to be making an attribute check, and then if the check, if the skill is relevant to the check and you're proficient in it, then add your proficiency bonus. So the better way, I think, to set that character sheet up to kind of get that in the players' minds. And I have seen adjustments. I've seen some really good adjustments for this on the internet. So you can find this. Is you just need your attribute scores, and then beneath it, you just need to have a list of what you are proficient in. That way you never see what you're not proficient in. And that way it's not on your mind. Oh, I don't have that skill. You look at your ability scores and then what you're actually proficient in. That's the way I want to do this here. I think that's the way to go. But yeah, there was supposed to be a lot more about that in 5th edition, I think, and it just got divided, or got de-emphasized and nearly taken out. 3 to 4 prime is a good one. Mind, body, charisma, and spirit. Okay, D says, I think ability scores 5, 6, or similar is not right. I think you should use 0 to 5. And about abilities, what about body, mind, spirit, and presence? Body, mind, spirit, and presence. So that's a unification of strength, and so we see people advocating unifying strength and dexterity. That makes that even more important. Body, mind, spirit. What are you guys trying to say spirit is? So if presence or bearing is our kind of ability to influence people, like, so for instance, like I would say that like Galadriel is high in presence or bearing or whatever the word needs to be. So Galadriel would be very high in that, especially when she's trying to influence, or when you could be awestruck. Like this could cause awe, or it could cause terror. Like you could also have somebody who is very terrifying be high in presence. That you pay attention when this person's in the room. You pay attention to this person socially, and when you're trying to coordinate people. I'm trying to look at I'm trying to remember always to think about these in terms of how can you influence the world. My personal thought is how these are influencing the world. So what are you thinking about spirit? How do you influence the world through spirit? If you are advocating like a unification of dexterity and strength, mind, spirit, and presence. Micah says 3 is what I went with, cutting down from the most common 6. Debated going 4, but didn't in the end. Yeah, strength, intimidation check. Yeah, using like intimidation skill with strength makes sense. Yeah, skills are supposed to be usable with any attribute. You just have to justify it. But it's so often, like I said, it's not played that way. So often not played that way. I've almost said agility. I think when I was writing this out, like these words are not finalized yet. So it is possible that dexterity becomes agility. It feels like it applies more to the majority of uses than to the attribute, but it's not that big of a deal. Yeah, so this is the Savage Worlds. If you're going to use skills, the way I like Savage Worlds does it, all your rolls accomplish something or rolled through your skills. With a level you can raise your skill to is determined by the attribute. Okay, yeah. So everything is rolled through your skills, but the level you can raise your skill is determined by the attribute. But if you need to resist something like rolling a save, you roll the attribute directly. Spirit is willpower for a 5e comparison. Okay, so let's talk about that. Let me see. Now, see over here. Let me grab Gertz over here. Let me bring up auxiliary camera. Where is auxiliary camera? Because, GURPS is one of my influences here. So let's take a look. Present extra camera. To change this up from last night. I think I need to go this way. Yeah, there we go. All right, so like GURPS here uses only 4 stats. Let me take this down. All right, so when we're looking at a GURPS character sheet, so here is a character sheet. So here is the way it set this up. And here was what I was thinking when I was looking at GURPS and trying to make a decision here. So GURPS uses its core stats are strength, dexterity, intelligence, and health. Strength, dexterity, intelligence, and health. And then secondary stats, which are derived from the primary ones. Your core right here, strength, dexterity, intelligence, and health. Over here, your secondary stats are HP. This is your hit points, your will. So it puts will over here. Now, there is an argument that some people say that will in GURPS is kind of like the missing 5th primary stat. It can be that important. So will is over here as a derived statistic. Perception over here, this is your perception. And then this is your fatigue points. So you got hit points and your fatigue points right here. So here's my problem here is that how many skills, like GURPS didn't really come up with a great way to use health if it's a primary statistic for influencing the world. If you go through all of the stats, all the skills, because GURPS skills are going to be based on your attributes, almost all, with 2 exceptions. I mean, all of the skills are either dexterity-based skills or they are intelligence-based skills. So these 2 are very important. And hey, how you move your body and how intelligent you are, yes, those are important. So basically all of the skills in GURPS are based off of DX or HT. I think singing for some reason is the health-based skill. but of all of the hundreds I guess, hundreds of skills in GURPS, since it's so skill based, there's only one that comes up with health like your constitution. Like, once you start trying to like make a list of skills and okay, what are you actually trying to do? I think that's when your stats, your core stats, kind of start to it shows which ones are most important, because there are not many strength-based skills. It's difficult to have strength-based skills, but they are there, and they are based on, moving the world physically, changing things because of your strength. So I'm okay with that. There aren't as many. Like in the modern world, we don't necessarily use our strength that much, but in an adventuring situation, strength is important. You can manipulate the world by using your strength. It's very difficult to change the world with your health or your constitution. And so we don't see, like, you can see that in Dungeons and Dragons as well. How many times do you make a constitution roll? This is something that's telling you, this is my distinction between an ability and a resistance. Health is telling you something about how hard it is for the world to influence you. Constitution is telling about how difficult it is for the world to influence you. Okay? Because if you drink some poison, if you're healthy, then you're going to be able to resist that poison better. To me, that's very similar to will over here. How can I change the world with my will? Now, you can probably think of different ways, like flowery languages kinds of ways to say that. He just did it by force of will. Okay, so will, I think, is important, but is, to me, okay, I'm about to sit here and change the world. How am I going to do it with just my will? That sounds rather difficult to me. It seems like you would be rolling for will if you're trying to march and you're being overcome by fatigue, but you're going to have to press on. Okay, well, if you are trying to resist the world's exhaustion, you could do it by force of will. Or if magic is being cast on you, maybe in a particular magic system or something like that, and you're resisting magic, how do you resist the magic? By your extreme will. It's difficult to dominate you. It's difficult to overcome you mentally. Or if someone's trying to do a psychic attack on you with psionics, to me, it seems like you resist with will. That's my thinking. But this is an important discussion to have. And I thought about it in the context over here with GURPS. Let's see what people are saying over here. So that was my thought with basically constitution and will. D says you can use dexterity plus intelligence as a reaction save. Sable Phoenix says 13th Age has a great way to use its 6 attributes as well. You derive your will, reflex, and fortitude saves from 2 stats each. Whichever one is higher gives you the save bonus. See, saves in 5th edition, or when we're talking about saves in 5th edition, it's very, we don't have a unified action resolution mechanic there, because sometimes you save. Most of the time you roll to do something, but sometimes you roll to save yourself. And I can't think of any reason why that is other than just legacy reasons. That's like when you're casting a spell or something. We did talk about that. So some people said there might be some kind of reasoning behind it. But to me, it seemed like that if there is, it wasn't like intuitive to me about when somebody rolls to do something and when somebody rolls a save. So that's not a unified action resolution mechanic. And to me over here, the people, I just lost my train of thought. Yes, Micah says, and yes, with GURPS, will is practically a 5th stat with how much you need it. But, oh no, so I was thinking over here, I want, not in GURPS, but over here, what we were writing, I want, if you're taking the action, you should be rolling the dice. If you're taking the action, you roll the dice. seeing Gertz stats, I can see willpower being a secondary. Will does feel to me more like a defense stat. Willpower can be a difficult thing to give a statistic since it's almost like morale in that it ebbs and flows and also different levels with relation to different parts of a person's life. Yes. So lots of situational modifiers, potentially. In body, all is connected. You can't be 18 strength and 8 con at the same time. How did you train all of that muscle? See, to me, the difference between strength and HT or strength and constitution, I always thought of the difference between the bodybuilders and the marathon runners. So that's how I would separate those two different kinds of characters. So the bodybuilder is 18 strength, lugging or lifting large amounts of iron in the lifting large amounts of iron in the gym. So you've got like the barbarian type, but don't necessarily ask that person to run the marathon because that would be their health, their constitution, something like that. That's when that's going to be rolling for. And likewise, when you see a bunch of marathon runners, or to me, the really high health or high constitution guys, most of those guys don't have or rail thin, no fat and no great muscle mass. They're rail thin. They are optimized for running and they're healthy. The strength guys, like that's to me how I would separate those two. You can have the strength guy, the barbarian who's strong but is not the long distance runner. You have the high HT guy who's long distance running. So that's how I would separate those. Okay, we're about to talk about magic here in a second. Will and fiction, because we're talking about building a general system here, a universal system. We're using the term generic system. So, this isn't a real generic. I mean, it is. That's a fine word for it. But also we could use universal. So Micah says, will and fiction is also a matter of how much you can influence the world or how you can how finally you can manipulate it with magic, etc. Yes, in some fantasy worlds, yes. Yes, it is. But what do you do? I mean, what do you do if you're doing a generic system and you don't have that? So will is magic, magic is muscles, magic reserves for stamina. Will is magic, magic is muscles. Oh, on the runway. Have a good time. Have a good trip. Let's see. Micah says, if something external affects you, roll a save. If you try to affect yourself, other entities, or the environment, roll a non-save check. Steel Mongoose says, is Constitution just slow twitch cardio endurance? Just, to me, it's more like that. That's the way I've always interpreted it in order to separate that from class. Right. Micah says Constitution is more like stamina over strength. So you could put stamina in there. How well you can hold your liquor, resist poison, keep marching, etc. Wait, so hot take. One of the most game-shaping things stats are responsible for is fighting against your character concept. You think that's happening to me? One of the most game-shaping things stats are responsible for is fighting against the core concept? Tomocrat says, Heath, what are my thoughts on secondary attributes? Well, like in GURPS, I'm fine with it. Like the derived attributes. Like, so we're going to, so in GURPS, like you derive HP from strength. Will's derived from intelligence. Which is the reason why a lot of people want to separate this, because you can adjust, you can change your will independently of intelligence. That's what it's based on. But you could have like, this is the absent-minded professor. Like, how do you create the absent-minded professor? Well, high IQ, low will, or low perception. So I'm fine with it. I don't know that how many stats we're going to, I mean, I guess there are derived and secondary stats the way we're going here. No, I'm refining it. You have the number of stats. Okay. All right. So now let's talk about magic then. Okay. So what do we say about that? I'd argue that in terms of combat, constitution would relate more to strength. Marathon runners are optimized for that one thing, but I've never seen one I'd be afraid to meet in a ring or on a mat. Let's see. Well, because in that situation, perhaps strength is more important. Strength in that case is more important than constitution. If you're about to have to beat somebody up in a mat on a ring, or somebody's trying to beat you up. So here's what I've said. So all of these are ways to influence the world. Well, what if you have other ways to influence the world? Like people were just talking about magic. How do you incorporate magic? Okay, so here's what I said. Because remember, this is the general toolkit for building out a world. So I said, as a note here, magic, psionics, and more. Here's my thinking there. In some game worlds, there may be other ways for characters to influence the world beyond the methods articulated above. For instance, in Star Wars, some characters have access to the Force. In Middle-earth and the world of Harry Potter, some characters have access to magic. In Star Trek, some characters have psionic or telekinetic powers. To model such powers in Fated Edge, those characters will have additional ability score or scores to represent those methods of influencing the world. Including this additional way for characters to manipulate the world can be a lot of fun and an important part of invoking the feel of many worlds, but are beyond the scope of this rules primer. The rules that govern them are left to the GM and the guides for specific worlds. So this is why magic is difficult. It's because we don't have any particular idea about what you can generally do with magic. We'll just use magic here generally to be psionics, the Force, telekinetics, whatever it is. We don't have if you ask me what kinds of things you can do with your strength, I know because I live in the world. And I also have a general idea about the kinds of things that are difficult or impossible to do with strength, like an ordinary human. What could they lift? What could they move? What can be done? What requires more people to push or pull? I mean, even living in the modern world where I said maybe strength isn't necessarily as important day to day, we all have this general understanding. And I think this is why this type of way of designing a game works, is because we have a general idea, because we all experience these things, arguably. We all know something about strength because we have bodies, intelligence because we have our brains, dexterity because we have our bodies and its movement, and we know something about this stat here that is our personal magnetism and social interactions and our ability to change the opinions of others. And so we understand what's easy, what's hard. We've got a general sense of that. And I think that's part of what allows us to play with these stats at the table, because we all have some kind of intuitive understanding about how to adjudicate these things. And so we can say hard strength check, moderate intelligence check, or whatever. And we all kind of understand that at the table. As soon as you say magic, and so basically we have free form strength, free form intelligence, free form dexterity, free form presence, all of that kind of already built into the table often, and it's kind of built into the game. It's much more difficult. Well, a lot of the time we'll say, gee, it sure would be great if we had a free form magic system that didn't require all the specification, but we can't have a free form magic system, or they are very hard to make because we don't have an intuitive understanding about what magic can do and what it can't, because magic doesn't exist. So I've got an intuitive understanding about what strength can do, but if you ask me how can I change the world and what is easy, what are easy tasks with magic, what are hard tasks with magic, I have no idea because magic doesn't exist. I have no experience with magic. So that's why magic systems often, I think, have to take up, will take up a large chunk of a book, right? The magic spells in Dungeons and Dragons, that takes up a lot of space. We were looking at the Rivers of London, that's magic, takes up a lot of space, because you've got to codify in any particular world what it is that magic can do and what it can't do and what's easy and what's hard. And that changes from world to world. So why would a system like this, or why would Fated Edge, the toolkit here, have a magic system? I mean, Gertz has a magic system that is a generic magic system. But then like thaumatology, that book has multiple different magic systems because there are multiple different magic systems that a world can have. So thaumatology went over that. But there is a standard GURPS magic system, but kind of just like, well, the Vancian magic from 5th edition. Okay, it's not like all magic operates according to the rules of the 5th edition game. Not even all different worlds, right? Or the way the magic spells have worked through different editions of Dungeons and Dragons. That's one interpretation of spells that works for certain game worlds and then has been built into the workings of certain game worlds. But that's not the way magic writ large works. That's just one possible way it can work. So GURPS did give you a generic magic system, which works just fine. Your magic is your spells are like skills. So you learn all of your different spells and have them at different levels. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's the way magic works in all games. So there's a system that is it's available for you in GURPS Magic. Go to GURPS Thaumatology and design your own system if it's not working. But when I realized that my core ability scores are ways that a human or ways that a character doesn't have to be human, the way that a character can influence the world, I realized, okay, well, what do you do with magic then? Oh, well, magic, the force, everything else, that is another way a character could influence the world that some characters in fantasy and science fiction have access to that we do not have access to in the real world. So they actually have another core statistic. How do you influence the world with your magic? So I put that in here to let you know where that would go. That would fit as another core stat. So in Star Wars, if I were creating a Star Wars game with this, force ability or the force would be another core stat, because in the world of Star Wars, some people can influence the world by using the force. Let's see what people are saying. James says, in my view, you don't need a stat spread to represent a character trait. Absent-minded professor will be borne out in the player's approach to social interaction. So Micah says, really depends on knowing how to play your build. If you're light, don't waste movement when you don't have to, but roll with the punches instead of solid blows landing, try to tire out and so forth. Exactly. Tomocrat says, for magic and special power, you have to determine how powerful you want it to be. Can you only bend spoons or can you move mountains? And that completely depends on the game world. That's defined within the game world. So that will be different for every game world. I mean, it's pointless to come up with here's the toolkit's way of saying magic works, because Middle Earth magic is different from Harry Potter magic. That's different from the magic that from Arthurian legend, which is different from the Force. It's completely different. So that's something that the world specific game designers really have to work in and have to lay out, and they have to be come up with a way for that to work. But mechanically, it would be a different stat. Well, let's see. Oh, good morning, Dungeon Master. Well, Dungeon Master says, good morning, Heath. Thank you for giving me something to look forward to every morning. Well, I'm glad that was exactly my goal. I know you guys are all waiting on me in the morning, so make sure that I was up. Originally, that was the goal. Make sure I'm up. Give me something to look forward to in the morning and every day that we are here. So I'm very glad that's the case with you as well. Steel Mongoose says, for me, the challenge with magic is the balance between making it too generic or allowing it to swallow up the other character niches. That is a challenge, unless like everyone's magical. I mean, which is effectively like the way Harry Potter is, right? That your magic, the primary way they influence the world is through magic. So your magic skill is probably going to be, or your magic stat is probably going to be extremely important in Harry Potter. And it probably will swallow up a lot of the other characters. I mean, are you going to go jump across something if you're in the Harry Potter universe? No, you're going to levitate your way across it. I mean, so that becomes a very important way for you to interact with the world. And arguably, in those kinds of cases, maybe if everything you do is magic, then you would have different types of magic, because instead of always having just one skill or something like that. But like I said, that's world specific too. That's world specific to me, because it could by its nature be the most important thing, like in Harry Potter. So ability scores, and see this, ability scores, like I said, this isn't the place to design the ability scores, but so I might have too much information here. This is still extremely early on here, but the purpose of this is to show you what is on a character sheet. Ability scores range from 0 and theoretically have no maximum, though 20 is a godlike score. Most humans will have ability scores between 3 and 8 with an average of 5. So this is the kind of ability score spread that you could have. This will tie into the action resolution system later. But the idea was that average, a 5. Human average 5 in those stats. If you're deficient, you might have a 3 or 4. Impaired, 1 or 2. Gifted could be anywhere between 6 and 9. Extraordinary, 10. Truly exceptional, 11 to 14. Incredible, 15. Godlike, 20. And God might be 25. Now, remember, where I'm ultimately going with the action resolution system is that, remember, we need to have large static modifiers in order to reduce the amount of randomness in the game after going through all of our dice analysis. Because originally I thought that, this has got to be a bell curve game. Because that's what I thought I wanted. Because I was trying, in order to reduce randomness, I've got to have the bell curve here. Did not work. We've already talked about the important thing is the ratio of the potential spread of your random modifier to what your general spread of static modifiers are. So if your modifiers are only +2, +3, maybe +4, +1, +2, +3, +4. If you're generally operating in the +1, +2, +3, +4 range, and you're rolling a D20, the D20 is the primary determining factor in whether or not you are going to be succeeding or failing on your roll. Because I want whether or not you succeed or fail to be actually something that is largely intrinsic to the character and what's on your character sheet. I want you to be able to look at your character sheet and understand what you are good at and what you are not good at. And then if you are good at things, then I want you to be able to accomplish actions using those things. I don't want that to be random, because if, look, I've got a +3 in intelligence and a +1 in strength and a -1. So I must be really good in intelligence things. But because I'm a +3 in that, right? But if you're still rolling a D20, you're all over the place. You really don't have an idea about whether or not you're going to be able to accomplish any particular task rolling a D20 and adding 3 to it. In order to make the D20 work, you have to have a lot higher static modifiers, so that your static modifier and your character's skill begin to overwhelm the random component. The random component would still be there. But likewise, that also means that if you switch to something like 2D10, because I thought, okay, let's go 2D10. People like to roll D10s. And what type of dice you like to roll is important too. So I was like, let's go 2D10, or let's go 3D6. So that gives you the 2 to 20 or the 3 to 18 bell curve. But if you're still operating with +1s, +2s, +3s, +4s, if you all of a sudden move to a bell curve, whether that's 2D20 or 3D6, like I said, you can look this up on the all of my dice analysis videos here on this channel. There was a whole series of them last year where we came to this conclusion. If you've got the bell curve, if you're operating in the +1, +2, +3, +4 level of bonuses, and you say, hey, let's reduce randomness, like I thought I was going to be able to do by doing this, and you switch to the 2D10 or the 3D6 bell curve, it does not help you nearly as much as you think. It helps a little bit. It helps a little bit, but not nearly as much as I thought. Your randomness, the bell curve, you don't reduce the randomness by adding in the bell curve. Of course, you reduce the distribution because you're no longer 5% all the way across the board. But whether or not you succeed or fail on most tasks was still determined by the dice at a much higher level than I was expecting. When I did that analysis, I was basically trying to figure out given a certain DC, given a certain task difficulty that you're trying to achieve, what is the predominant reason you succeed or fail on that task? And there were two options. Given a DC, what percentage of the time are the dice determining whether or not I'm succeeding or failing, versus what percentage of the time are my skills determining whether or not I'm succeeding or failing? So I was calculating those two things. Like, given a DC of 15 or whatever, an arbitrary DC, how many times do the dice determine whether or not I succeed or fail versus how many times do my skills succeed or fail? And so I want the skills to determine success or failure a lot more. Skills or abilities, your character stats, speaking loosely here, but your character stats, I want to be the predominant factor in whether or not you succeed or fail. Far fewer amount of times should you fail because of the dice. Honestly, James Bacon says, I've said this before, for a free-form magic system, you can probably look to superhero games. Each character is like a mage with a highly specific school of magic. Only they practice. You could look at it that way. Yeah, so in a superhero game, you would need another stat. So that could be hero power, said in a universal sense, but something like that. My character influences the way the world through hero power, whatever that is. BGD says RPG design is a lot like baking a cake. You have to be careful what you bake into it because you probably won't be able to take it back out later. That could be true. Steel Mongoose says, I'm still over in the bell curve stage. Check out some of the videos I did on that. Like I said, should we move to 2D10? If you look up on my channel, like 2D10 or 3D6, there's a series on that. So you'll be able to see what I came to. I mean, I'm not saying it's wrong, but it didn't end up doing what I thought it did, and which I hadn't seen that discussed enough. So like Mark Tassin, I was watching people, Mark Tassin, when he was doing the Cool Name RPG, a lot of people said they wanted a bell curve system. And I was wondering, what are they wanting? What are those people wanting out of the bell curve system? And is the bell curve system actually doing that? And it surprised me. I mean, I was surprised. I was like, oh, just swapping over to a bell curve system is not actually doing what I want to do. Micah says, if your attempts tie to 6 improv resolution states with penalties to other entities for successes, there's an option rather than outright killing, then any check. Oh, I'm coming in the middle of that conversation. Dungeon Master says, one of the old D&D books had an entire chapter on bell curves, and as complicated as it was helpful. There was a little bit of information on what happens if you go bell curve. If you go bell curve in Unearthed Arcana. Okay, now, and this is actually a good time for this insight. Let me find this section. Unearthed Arcana. Okay, right here. Let me see if I can find that. It was in the DMG. Well, there may have. Yeah, I'm sure it was. I'm sure a couple of places. This is what I brought over here. Let me bring this up. I remember a brief. This was not the full discussion, but there was a brief part in here about bell curves. This is the 3rd edition Unearthed Arcana right here. Oh, you're talking about free format. Okay, I'll have to get back into that. Because I would like to, I mean, it may not be right for any particular world, but a free form magic system is something that a lot of people say they want. But also with a freeform magic system, you have to, you still have to know what's possible in the world. Vitality and wounds. There was something, vitality and wounds. That's what I thought. The Knave second edition. I was confused. It seems like Knave second edition should have been using the vitality and wounds system. Behind the curve, class, defense. Look, behind the curtain, the bell curve. So this is what this says about adjusting or using a bell curve in, this is 3rd edition D&D, but it's generally it generally applies. It says behind the curtain, the bell curve. In general, this variant leads to a grittier D&D game. And I think that's that's one of the reasons why people who want a grittier game kind of go to the bell curve. It says D&D game, it leads to a grittier D&D game because there will be far fewer very good and very bad rolls. That doesn't mean that it's not taking away. See, okay, well, let me just read what it says here. There will be far fewer very good or very bad rolls. True. You're not necessarily changing what percentage very much of the rolls, of the number of checks that are decided by dice versus skill. You're not doing that nearly as much as you think you are. I found out, but you are reducing very good and very bad rolls, the number of those. Not only, now that can work well if you are trying to do critical hits and critical failures, but you don't want critical failures and critical hits to happen 5% of the time. Not only can you no longer roll a 1, 2, 19, or 20, I believe this is talking about using 3d6. So if you tried to play Dungeons and Dragons with 3d6, not only can you no longer roll a 1, 2, 19, or 20, but most rolls will be clustered around the average of 10.5. With a d20, every result is, my contacts have slid around my eyes. With a d20, every roll is equally likely. You have a 5% chance of rolling an 18 or 19. Yes, we know that. Abilities. Well, I can't read. My contacts have slid on my eyes, and I can't even see what I'm talking about here. What he's going to go on and say, he's talking about who does the reduction in randomness hurt? Is ultimately who. Okay, actually, contacts back. With 3d6, there's only one possible combination to roll at 18. Players used to the thrill of rolling high, and the agony of a natural 1 will get that feeling less often, but it may be more meaningful when it does happen. Good rolls are a fundamental reward of the game. It changes how the character of the game see the rewards or something stronger but less frequent. My initial argument is that I think it would be better because I hate the swinginess. I hate it when, I'm rolling this D20 and I'm playing this character and I'm just all over the place and I can't hit anything. If I had some more predictability from the randomness, then I should be able to, my thought was, then I should still have a better idea of how good my character is. Game balance shifts subtly when you use the bell curve variant. And I think this is important if you're for like a Dungeons and Dragons style game. Because it says that rolling 3d6 gives you a lot more average rolls, which favors the stronger side in combat. And in the D&D game, that's almost always the PCs. Increases in randomness hurt the PCs. I do think that's a good observation. Because the PCs are probably the stronger side. So if you can rely on your skills more, and the game becomes less random, that helps the players. But in general, if you're designing a game from the ground up, like I'm doing here, that's fine. I want the players to have a greater understanding of their skills. In the D&D game, that's almost always the PCs. Many monsters, especially low CR monsters encountered in groups, rely heavily on lucky shots to damage the PCs. Have a bunch of goblins. They all throw spears or whatever they attack. Some of them will be lucky enough to roll 18, 19, or 20, and they'll damage. You have enough goblins, you're throwing enough, you're throwing too many. I mean, you're throwing so many dice, some of them will hit. That's the strategy. When rolling 3d6, these lucky shots will have fewer and further in between. In a fair fight, which someone rolls a 10, the PCs will win almost every time. The bell curve variant, therefore, more tightly to the average, which is the reason adheres more tightly to the average, which is the reason behind the reduction in CR for most monsters encountered in the group. Another subtle change to the game is the bell curve rewards bonuses relatively more and the die roll relatively less. See, that was originally what I wanted. Yes, I want the bonuses to be rewarded more, and it does reward the bonuses more, but not nearly enough in my opinion. Simply because the die roll will almost always be in a few points of 10. The character's skills, ability scores, and gear have far greater impact on the success and failure than they do in the standard D&D rules. So that passage is probably one of the reasons why I was like, all right, so if I were designing from the ground up, I'd want to go bell curve, because I want what's on the character sheet to be more important. I want to emphasize the character stats. What? I want that, but it doesn't do it enough. Let's see. All right, so that was the thought there. What time is it? Now, what I have thought about a lot less, so I don't have as much here, but I do have this idea of resistances. Okay, so your other stats will be resistances. So I'll talk this out. So resistances are a measure of how difficult it is for the world to affect the character. This should be affect. Generally in a negative way. When some other force in the world, whether that's another character, a force of nature, or something else is trying to inflict harm on a character in some way, or otherwise make the character do something he or she would not ordinarily do, the game master makes a check where the target number is the score of the character's relevant resistance. And this is before I had been thinking about also potentially having it be character facing. So my issues here with the resistances, okay, if notes here, if there is a player facing option, rules option, by that we mean the players are rolling all the dice, and by players we're specifically making the distinction between a player character and the dungeon master or game master. If there's a player facing rules option, the resistances also need to be set up so the player would roll them. That would mean these are a lot like saves. In that case, this would become a lot like saves. The player would roll them. Because here's a rule for like a universal kind of action resolution mechanic, that the players always roll the dice. So what were we looking at? We were looking at a game just like that the other day, where that wasn't that. No, it wasn't. I forget what that was. Where the bad guys are like always assumed to hit. And I was like, they're always assumed to hit. Yeah, because you have to roll to avoid it. So one way that your universal system could go is that the player characters, the players always make rolls. So if they are trying to attack the skeleton, they need to roll to hit the skeleton. If the skeleton attacks them, they need to roll to avoid the skeleton's hit. You're always player facing. That's one option. The one reason that I said that we could have optional player facing rules, the player facing rules, sometimes game masters like to roll dice too. But if you had solo play, having all player facing dice rolls or an option for all player facing dice rolls would be good. That way you're always rolling on behalf of your character rather than having to also roll on the behalf of the bad guys. The resistances also need to be set up so the players can roll them. So that's a thought. I have not thought all the way through the solo play and its potential implications. I just said that when I'm playing solo, like when I'm playing Hero Quest, I wish the app would roll for the bad guys because I like rolling for me. I hate having to defend, especially when I roll well for the bad guys to defend. But if the player is rolling, then resistances become a lot like saves, like what we would call a save in other games. But when not player facing, basically this is your AC, right? This is like what is an AC? Like trying to unify. I don't want to have a separate combat rules. I don't want separate combat rules. I want the same rules for resolving an action, whether that action is leaping across a pit or if that action is attempting to kill the orc. Right? I want the same mechanics to be there. So AC armor class is a kind of resistance. I'm not saying I'm using that, but we have an idea that, hey, we've got a resistance score here. A bad guy is trying to attack you, trying to shove a spear in your gut. Well, a Dungeons and Dragons character has a kind of resistance that tells you how difficult that is to do that. So what type of resistances, how many different ways can you resist something? Well, to me, like, and I haven't thought this out as well as the core abilities, but resistances could include, I would like to have a smaller number of these as well, but for some reason I'm getting more of these. Resistances could include, if you're trying to resist the world's action upon you, toughness, spear headed to your body, headed inside your body. How tough are you? Now, like, you could augment your toughness by putting on armor, right? I'm trying to put this spear in this orc. Part of the ability to not do that is his physical toughness, right? Or if you're attacking some kind of lizard man who's got natural armor. This is where I'd put will as a resistance. This is, your resistance to being mentally dominated. Domination or mental determination. In the situation where you're using your will to prevent the world from influencing you. This is also where I would put either health, I'm not sure what it would be, health called, but health or constitution. Because like even in Dungeons and Dragons, you very infrequently need to make a constitution roll to do something. Most of the time, it's like a constitution save or something that's preventing you from doing something else. So this is, prevents or resists the effects of fatigue, poison, etc. So those three seem pretty obvious to me: toughness, will, health, constitution. I think it could work like that. I'm not even sure this system is going to work. That this is just thinking this out with the resistance. So this is the part that I've thought least about with these. But those seem like ways to resist. And like I said, those could potentially be handled as saves as well. But here's the problem that I've got. If only HeroQuest had an AC, maybe all those traps wouldn't have had such an impact. Maybe not. Those traps, the traps were terrible last night. But I can think of some situations where let's look at our core attributes here. Can you resist the impact or resist the influence of the world with your dexterity? It also seems like you can, because you dodge out of the way. I mean, classic kind of pit trap right here. So something like dexterity. So here's the problem. Dexterity also seems like it should be used to resist. some effects. Strength, you could use strength to resist some effects. You could use intelligence to resist some effects. I think that one's a little bit more difficult, but I think. And then could you use your presence to resist effects? Yeah, absolutely. Like if somebody is trying to influence you socially or overawe you or something like that, or terrify you, your personal bearing, presence, whatever, could be used to resist that. I mean, maybe it's will too. I want it to be obvious what's being resisted here. So maybe that's will. But the problem is, it seems like that my core abilities here, yes, they can be used to influence the world, but they can also be used to resist elements of the world. And then plus there are at least these three different ways that seem like you can resist things, but not use them actively. So, but it seems like dexterity, strength, because if I've got like strength, if I've got an ogre blocking the door and I'm going to try to push the ogre out of the way, well, the ogre is going to resist being pushed by his strength. Like of all the things we've talked about. So that's like would resist the being moved. Dexterity. Oh, you've sprung the trap. Make an equivalent of a dexterity save. So that seems to make sense. Intelligence and presence seem like they should also be able to resist. So that, unfortunately, if each one of those core stats has an analogous resistance score or a complementary resistance score, okay, I wasn't really planning on it being that way. But then I've got 3 other resistance scores as well. It would be nice if I had 4 resistance scores, 4 abilities and 4 resistance scores. It would be nice if they were exact, but they don't seem to be exact, because you need more here. You need more, and I'm not sure how to handle that. This seems to me to be inelegant. If I just had 4, because like I said, I want all of the character's actions to run through the abilities. So that means that anything that can happen to you needs to be able to be run through your resistances. And the longer the list gets, the more time consuming it is. I mean, there are only those 4, people are talking about 3, but there are only 3 or 4 abilities, and everything that you're trying to do runs through those. Pick the most relevant of those 3 or 4. That's pretty easy. Now, something's happening to you. How do you resist? Well, if there are only 3 or 4 resistances, then it would seem obvious. Pick the one that's closest to it. There are general categories. If there are now 7 different resistances, that becomes less clear. So that's the biggest design issue at this level that I'm fighting with at the moment. How do I make resistances elegant? Because like I said, the 3 resistances that I thought of, like, of the core stats we typically work with, these are the ones that seem to be resistances. But that doesn't mean that you can't resist with an ability. That's what's making it inelegant. So I got to think more about that. See if anybody has thoughts on that. Dexterity is for a fine motor skill, I thought. Acrobatics would be more agility. Well, yeah, it could be. I mean, role-playing games, we just talked about, like, what's the right word for this? Dexterity or agility? I mean, I've seen both used. Tomocrat says, have you done a look over at the World of Darkness base system previous on YouTube? I have never looked at World of Darkness on YouTube. I think I have read it. I think I've looked at it. I'm pretty sure I have read it. It's been a while, but I have not looked at it on YouTube. There would be a good way to look over there with the main attributes and sub attacks. It would be good to look at. So maybe World of Darkness needs to come up. My notes are over there. So maybe World of Darkness needs to come up. So Dungeon Master says physical, mental, and magical resistances, but it can't always be magical resistance. But magical doesn't work. It could work. So this is one of those things that in a particular game world you could add back in magical. But I don't think that I would put, like, I didn't put a magic stat in your attributes, even though you could use magic to influence the world. But I said that in a world-specific guide, then it would be added in because that's how you influence the world. So maybe you would need to add in magical defense, depending on how your particular magic works in a particular world-specific guide. Having magical resistance might seem to make perfect sense. But in the event that you don't have magic, well, see, physical, mental, and or social or something. Physical, mental, and social. It may be that like toughness is not, we handle toughness in a different way, because maybe your defense is more about dexterity. So maybe if you're trying to come up with something, somebody's trying to hit you with a spear or stab you with a spear, what matters? The toughness of your body or your ability to dodge and get out of the way? What's the relationship between those two things? I'm not exactly sure yet. So if you combined, like you're talking about physical and just said toughness and also dexterity, well, if you did that, would you combine that with strength? What I would do is I would get rid of toughness and just say that would give us see, it's still odd that we have more resistances than we have abilities. I got to think about this more. Social sounds cool. It seems like you should have some kind of social resistance. Critical Roles Candelabra Obscura looks like it uses a 4 Critical Roles Candela Obscura system looks like it uses a 4 attribute system. If we can find that, it seemed like it was, somebody said no, that wasn't actually out yet. Somebody said there was some small PDF out yet. We do need to look at that. I'd be interested to see what they're doing. All right. Well, that's where I am. That's my current thinking. That gets us through our attributes and resistances. So I have enjoyed the conversation. Lots of you guys advanced the conversation and the thought on this. So I really appreciate your being here. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to go and try to do some other stuff today. I got to catch up on emails and messages and Discord server and everything like that. So I'll be doing that today, and also need to clean. So later, everybody, I hope that you go on to be creative, productive, and grind on. I'll see you tomorrow. Later.